It's back. Hat check, sunglasses check, Pepsi check, notes check, sources check. Let's go. Welcome back to Golden Blue Dude, everybody, and all we do here is college football. So if you're a college football fan, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. And as always, feel free to send gear to represent you and your team. Look around. That's what my background is made of. So if you want to be a permanent part of Golden Blue Dude and my background, send gear to represent yourself and your team to P.O. Box 360, Liberty, South Carolina 29657. Yeah, I got to do another car video. You know how my schedule gets sometimes. I'm in the car line and I decided that I wanted to do another video, so it's going to have to be a car video. Some of these are good, some of them not so good, so I'll leave it up to you whether this one's a good one or not. Yesterday I talked about the Pac-12's chances of getting into the playoffs. Today I want to talk about the ACC's chances of getting to the playoffs. And I know, Clemson. It comes down to Clemson. But besides Clemson, are there any other teams besides Clemson that has a chance to make the playoffs out of the ACC? Because remember last year when Clemson didn't win the ACC and Pitt won the ACC missed the playoffs. Well, what if Clemson picks up a couple of losses this year? Does that mean that the ACC misses the playoffs again? Well, it's certainly a possibility, a big possibility, but I think the ACC has a better shot of making the playoffs without Clemson this year than they did last year. And it comes down to 6 teams? Yeah, I think it comes down to 6 teams. 6 teams still have a shot to make the playoffs if Clemson can't get the job done. First, we'll start off with number 14, N.C.State. They just lost to Clemson 30-20. Their record is 4-1. Right now, their best win is against Texas Tech 27-14. That's not a good win as far as to hang your head on. But NC State will have several chances to add to their resume. Here's what the rest of their schedule looks like. They get Florida State at home next game. They have to win that game. Number 1, to get to the playoffs. Number 2, to have any shot to get to the ACC championship. Must win that game. After that, on the road to number 22, Syracuse. That's going to be a tough game. Syracuse is looking pretty good this year. Then you get Virginia Tech at home. Then you get number 15, Wake Forest at home. Another big test. Then you get Boston College at Louisville and at North Carolina. Now, NC State is averaging 32.8 points per game, which is 57th. Not a great offense, but not a terrible offense. And they're allowing 15.4 points per game, which is 19th. So an elite defense and an okay offense. They're going to have opportunities to add to their resume at Syracuse and Wake Forest. Those are the 2 biggest games remaining on their schedule. But this next game against Florida State, that's a big one too. You got to win that one to keep any hopes alive. Now, for NC State to get to the ACC championship and have any shot to get to the playoffs, they actually need Clemson to lose twice, because now Clemson has the tiebreaker over NC State. So NC State's one of those teams where not only do they need help from Clemson, but they'll also need help from other leagues as well. They need the Pac-12 to cannibalize themselves, and they also need the Big 12 to cannibalize themselves. And any of these one-loss potential ACC champions need the second place runner-up in the Big 10 and the SEC to have 2 losses if they want any shot to make the playoffs. So it's a long shot for NC State, but they still have a chance. Next, we'll jump to Florida State. They're also 4-1. They're coming off a loss to Wake Forest, so they need Wake Forest to lose another game. They have some big-time opportunities. Right now, their best win is at LSU 24-23. That's better than NC State's best win, and their only loss was to number 22 Wake Forest 31-21. Not a bad loss as well. Next game at number 14, NC State. If they can win this game, Florida State will gain a lot of confidence for their next game, number 5 Clemson. So Florida State could be taken completely out of the equation with these next 2 games. But after that, Georgia Tech at Miami, at number 22 Syracuse, Louisiana, and Florida. They're averaging 34.2 points per game, which is 49th, and allowing 21.2 points per game, which is 41st. So an okay defense and an okay offense. Nothing elite, but nothing terrible. But Florida State has one of the tougher remaining schedules in the ACC. But they haven't lost to NC State or Clemson yet, so there's still a shot. Next up is Wake Forest. Number 15 Wake Forest, also 4-1. Their only loss, a close loss to number 5 Clemson in 2 overtimes, 51-45, and their best win is at number 23 Florida State, 31-21. Wake Forest isn't in a bad position, but they do need Clemson to lose 2 games because Clemson holds the tiebreaker over them. So to add to their resume, here are their next games. Army, Boston College, at Louisville, at number 14 NC State. Golden opportunity right there. North Carolina, number 22 Syracuse. Another great opportunity. And then at Duke. They're averaging 40.4 points per game, which is 17th. An elite offense, but allowing 28.6 points per game, which is 89th. That's not a good defense at all. They need that ranking to jump probably in the mid-50s to have a respectable defense. But Wake Forest still has a chance. They need a bunch of help like everybody else, but they still have a chance. Let's jump on over to the Coastal, because these two teams have an excellent shot to make the ACC championship because they're in the ACC Coastal. First up, North Carolina. They're 4-1. Their best win is at Appalachian State, 63-61, and their only loss was to Notre Dame, 45-32. That's looking like a bad loss. What about their opportunities remaining? At Miami, at Duke, that is an opportunity. Duke's a good team. Pitt, at Virginia Tech, at number 15 Wake Forest, Georgia Tech, and number 14 N.C.State. North Carolina still has some opportunities. They are averaging 45.4 points per game, which is 7th in elite offense, but they're allowing 33.6 points per game, which is 113th. So that is a terrible, terrible defense. I don't think North Carolina really has a shot to make the playoffs, but they do have a decent shot to make the ACC championship just because of how terrible the Coastal is this year. The other team in the Coastal, Duke, they're also 4-1. Their best win, I guess, is against Virginia, 38-17, and their only loss was on the road to Kansas, 35-27. That's not a bad loss at all. Here's what their schedule looks like. At Georgia Tech, North Carolina, at Miami, at Boston College, Virginia Tech, at Pitt, and number 15 Wake Forest. So Duke's schedule is really, really easy. That's actually a problem. You're not going to have many opportunities to impress any type of committee. Really, your best potential win is number 15 Wake Forest. They're averaging 35 points per game, which is 38th, and allowing 19 points per game, which is 29th. So a decent offense and a decent defense. They could run the table and get to the ACC championship and then upset Clemson. Does that give Duke a chance to make the playoffs? I think it does, because you'd look at back-to-back wins over a pretty good Wake Forest at home and then over a pretty good Clemson. Hopefully they're undefeated. Duke needs Clemson to be undefeated and then beat them for a one-loss Duke to get into the playoffs. But yes, there is a chance. I just don't like how soft their schedule is. I don't know if the committee is going to respect this schedule or not. Two great wins at the end if they win both those games, but the rest of the schedule is cake, to be honest with you. And finally, the last team probably has the highest chances of making the playoffs out of anybody except for Clemson, and that's Syracuse. They're undefeated. So far, their best win is against Purdue, 32-29. Purdue did just go on the road and beat a ranked Minnesota. A lot of people think Minnesota will win the Big Ten West, so that's a decent win. And I know, the officials helped Syracuse win that game. But hey, a win's still a win. They're averaging 38.4 points per game, which is 22nd, and allowing 14 points per game, which is 9th. So Syracuse has an elite defense and a pretty good offense. I was not expecting these stats. Here's a look at the remaining schedule. Next, they get number 14, N.C.State. Golden opportunity right there, and if they win that game, maybe that will give them confidence and give them a chance to go on the road the next game against number 5, Clemson, and beat them. After that, you get Notre Dame at home, at Pitt, Florida State, at number 15 Wake Forest, and at Boston College. Syracuse by far has the toughest remaining schedule, but if they can run the table and just pick up one loss, as long as it's not to Clemson, because then they would need Clemson to lose twice, that's still a great resume. You're still in good shape. And you got ranked early in the season, so that's a good sign as well. I think Syracuse has a decent shot of getting to the playoffs as long as they pick up no more than one loss, and you have to beat Clemson. So Syracuse does control their own destiny right now. And I saw an article in ESPN where they ran 20,000 simulations to see what teams made the playoffs, and Syracuse did make a couple of those playoffs in those simulations. So even the simulations give Syracuse a little bit of hope to make the playoffs. Y'all let me know in the comments section. For the ACC, do you think it's Clemson or bust to get to the playoffs? And if not, who do you think has the best shot to get to the playoffs if it's not Clemson? That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.